So
What,
tell me about this idea of time that
right,
you have.
right. So time, coming to understand that I have been indoctrinated in the idea of the 24 hours, this amount of time I sleep, this amount of time I function when I eat, how much rest I get, how much, time, how do I dispel, okay, all right. Assuming we get our 8 hours of sleep, which we really don't, but let's say we do. We really have 16 hours based on how we've been sort of taught. We function around those 16 hours in that day. This includes work, eating, relaxing, traveling to and fro, however your life functions. If you're a mother, your children, preparing meals, etc. Just how we, and all of us are, based on what our um, realities are, we have to figure out how do we spend those 16 hours. And with that, by the time you shave off the required responsibilities, grocery store, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then the question then becomes, we start figuring out where do I find the time to relax? Where do I find the time to be in the now, and etc. But that's only because we're defining it in the way we've been indoctrinated to. I'm coming to the understanding for myself that is the issue of quality of time. So for instance, let's assume I'm able to get all my chores and all my obligations done within a certain period. And let's just say, for argument's sake, I have an hour to play with in a given day. Then I'm thinking, well, what do I do? Do I read? Whereas if I concern myself about the quality of time, I might ask a different question. Not so much, what do I do in that hour? Because I want to read, I want to talk to, I want to maybe call you, Sarah, to see how you're doing. Let's just say whatever. I want to check up on my mom. So then what happens is I have a basket of things I'm trying to shove into that hour. As opposed to, which is where I'm leaning, when that hour arises, I let that hour tell me how to spend it. So instead of me trying to shove into that hour, I have a relationship with that hour. I know this sounds kind of crazy, right? So I respect my time, I value my time, and I let my higher self and the time dictate how that goes. Because let's say when that hour comes up, I might want to take a nap. I might want to do something different than I was going to do before, that I had planned. But because we're taught to function on clock time, we feel that we have to shove in everything. And then that takes away from the quality of it because it becomes more of quantity. So I'm more interested in quality of time and what that means, right? Like I haven't figured out what it means yet. I'm just asking the question. What does it mean to engage with time in a respectful way, actually, right? Understanding that, and I think when we get older, and we look at how much clock time, it sends panic and anxiety. Because this is what happens, right? So let's say you're at a certain age and you're like, I only have another, figuring out what you think you have. Oh, I may have another good 20 years. Did I achieve what I was supposed to? And then it becomes this one anxiety. And I think that this is where people start going about what they failed in. Oh, I was going to do X, Y, and Z, and I haven't done that. Instead, I ended up doing that. And then you devalue that thing that you did. And it's I'm now sort of unpacking the way we beat ourselves up, the way we judge ourselves, the way we judge others in what we think should have happened based on time. Right? So what if we took the pressure off ourselves and say, who knows if I will or won't, but right now I'm good. And respect your time and maybe just sitting down and listen to birds chirp. I don't know. But I just think that we have adopted and accepted somebody's version of what our time should include.
Mm.
Right? Like I think about it for me, right? Society would say, well, okay, you're 52, 50, well, 52? I think I'll be 53 in April, but you didn't have any children. You've never been married. You've never whatever. Did I miss my life? Right? If I was to feed into that, I would then say, well, I didn't do the basic things other women have done. I've never been married, never had children. You know, what is my life surmounted to? You know, um, I don't, thankfully, but if I did, I could make myself upset about it. I could, because I'm judging against what somebody else achieved in their 30 years without realizing and respecting that my journey is unique, just like theirs is unique. They might achieve certain things that I didn't, but I may achieve things that they've never been able to because they've had children and because they've been married and because they've had other obligations and they neglected themselves. So the question then becomes, right? And this is the egg, whose life is more valuable? And we get into that game, but there's no real answer because it shouldn't be a question, really. Right? If that person got married and had children, whatever they achieved, that was what they were supposed to achieve. Their life ended and was full based on what it was for them. Mine equally, another person. So I think that I remember, like, by this time you're supposed to get married. I remember all those things, oh my God. Or when you're dating someone, how long is it gonna take before they pop the question? Like you're supposed to go along. I feel like this sort of assembly line. Hey, got stamped. You got stamped on your head, you're engaged. You got stamped, you're married. You got stamped, you got, had children. You got stamped, and for people who didn't go down that assembly line, oh, what did my life amount to? Am I a failure? And a lot of it is around time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember I was not quite somewhere in my 30-ish, and one of my professors asked me if I was going to do my MBA. And I said, don't you think I'm too old to do that? I was in my like early 30s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that she'll ever know. I've told her, but like the impact she had with her answer was the time passes anyway. 5 years from now, you could have your MBA, or 5 years from now, you can be in a totally different place. And for me, that was very enlightening about what you do now matters. And I love this idea of quality.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What you choose to spend your time on. And by the way, I love that you might decide to take a nap.
Mm-hmm.
I, for a really long time, judged myself very harshly
Mm-hmm.
for thinking that, man, I'm really tired. If I would just take a nap, I would feel so much better. And this past year, since we've been doing all this work, if I feel super tired, I go take a nap.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't judge myself about that. And
Mm-hmm.
and I love that I've grown into a person
Mm-hmm.
who is okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I never connected it with time. I mean, I always knew about these sort of expectations that were imposed on all of us,
Mm-hmm.
men and women for different roles, men for different roles, because they're trapped in their roles too.
Right.
But the power of how time, that layer of time, how it impacts us, right? And there's this thing that is interesting. My mom's telling me when she was a nurse in England, there was this nurse, she was a Jamaican, and she was probably in her 30s, but was considered older, maybe 30. And all of them were married, right? Because they were in the early 20s, they were married. That was, and she wasn't in the lane. She wasn't going through that assembly line, I guess. And they asked her, don't you want to be married? And she said, oh God, what was it? She said, Some eat early and are hungry later. Some eat later and are always satisfied.
Mm.
And that landed for my mother, even though she was married already. And she passed that on to me. And it's funny because I remember her telling me this. I don't remember the first time she made that statement, but it's stuck in my head. And I think that it's been there, right? It's been one of this woman impacted me, although I've never met her. And, you know, when I was in law school, when I was in, people were like, no, don't you want to get married? Or when are you going to have children? You know, those type of things. And I remember one of my aunt, bless her soul, she had said, because, you know, they come from that generation. She said, girl, you're going to get married. And I remember one day I was in my, I think was I in law school around that time? And my mom, that was the first time, and it was a whole bunch of us family, you know, women pretty much. And my mom told her, she said, stop, don't do that. Don't put those pressures on my daughters. If they choose never to get married, that's fine. If they choose to get married later, that's fine. Do not put pressure on them as if their life, they're missing something, as if their life isn't worth something because they, and hearing my mom, I mean, I knew my mom felt that way because she never did that. But hearing her say, and then being able to say to them, like, this is some nonsense we got, you need to stop because you're handing down the same nonsense, right? And I've heard older women say to me, if they had the choice, if they grew up in the time we are, they probably would never have gotten married. Or they might have chosen to have children and not gotten married. Or maybe got married and didn't have children. Or maybe, I mean, there's all kinds of combinations we can have. But it's interesting because even though we have those choices and it's not as prohibitive, it's still there. You can still feel it. Like,
Yeah.
are you lonely? Are you, yeah.
I love, first of all, I love that your mom
Mm-hmm.
was like that. And it was a good reminder to me because I try really hard not to put those pressures on Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's 22
Right. He's
and
still learning about himself. Yeah.
right, right.
Like that's
And
the
it would
best
be
thing he
super
could do.
easy to fall back into that thing because my mom called me the other day and she's like, she's, I think, going to have her fifth great grandbaby.
Wow.
And they're all from my sister's kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super easy for me to go, oh,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Oh. And I'm like, no, I don't want to put that kind of pressure on
Mm-hmm.
Marcus. I want him to live his life.
His life.
However,
And
however he chooses.
and here's the thing, right? When I think about the person I was in my 20s, I made a comment to someone. I'm glad I never did get married because what if I'd married someone who was not confident enough to allow me to grow?
Mm-hmm.
What would I have not become?
Yeah.
And I'm still learning about myself. We talk about this all the time, right? I still feel like a fish out of water, learn about myself. And I know we'll never figure it all out. I don't have that pressure on myself, but it's just something to think on, right? And I think that, the best thing Marcus or any young person learn about themselves could do for anyone at some point if they get married is to know who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of divorces that typically happen once kids get to college is because those people realize they don't know who the hell they are and they don't know who the hell they married. They don't know. Now, and that's in addition to life pushing them because you got to run this
Oh
one to
yeah.
soccer and right. So there's other life pressures. But even with that, they're growing and because they're busy, they're both at work. I mean, life is there's so demands and this sucking of the time that by the time they're like, I don't know who I am. All I know is I've been a mother, I've been a father, I've been schlepping this person from the time they came out, getting them to school, getting them all their needs. I don't know what my needs are. And I
Yeah.
certainly don't know what yours are because I don't know who you are either. And most marriages, if you put, break at that point, because in reality, no one even figured out who they were in the first place, because had they done, maybe they wouldn't have picked that person. Now, I
Yeah.
know that relationships, people are always growing, and there's always that potential for them to grow apart. I understand that. But I still think that if you had a better anchor of who you are, you might have chosen differently.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think that's important, right? As we're growing and as our children, if we have children, are growing, to understand that, like, the better you understand yourself. And I think that not even in marriage, right? I
Just in life.
feel like the better I learned about myself. So we were talking earlier before we started recording about um I feel in the last 4 years, I've probably grown more than most people have grown in 20,
Mhm,
because it's been a lot of really intentional work.
mhm,
And I think in business and life, the better you understand yourself and
mhm.
all your little quirky things, the more fulfilled you are, because you're not, at least for me, I don't judge myself. I don't judge
Mhm.
myself nearly as harshly as I did um before I started doing this type of work. And I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, and I'm writing this down because I think that that's the point, right? So I wrote here, you can offer others and life more the better you know yourself, right? Because I mean, we, because the better we know ourselves, the better we're like better people to be in relationships with, whether it's friendships, romantic, whatever.
Yeah.
We're better. I know that my relationships have improved because I have shifted, not wanting them to shift me. I have shifted. So the way I react to things, it's a whole different person. And then so they're now reacting to a different person.
Yeah.
And they then are adjusting themselves. Maybe they're more comfortable now. Maybe, those type of things. But the word you use, and I think that this is the crux of it, intentional, right? So we settled on an intentional journey,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even though even choosing PBC was an intentional journey, we didn't understand how it was going to play out, but we made it. We wanted a shift. We didn't know what the hell the shift was, but we knew we needed a shift. That was the start. And then it's
Yeah.
blossomed to what it's blossomed to.
Yeah.
So, like I tell people, you don't have to know destination. Destination is actually irrelevant. It's beginning. That's it. Like, I don't know where I'm going or what I want to go, where I want to go, or what I want to do. I just know right now it's not enough. And just knowing that whatever your life is now is not feeding you, and this is the word I use, feeding you.
Mm-hmm.
Because life is always, you could live, like, I think, I just thought about this. I think, Sarah, one of my greatest fears was to live a life, an irrelevant life. And I didn't know what a relevant life would look like. And I still
You're right.
don't really know. But I just don't want to just exist. Like, I don't want to be something that's just there.
I love that. What it reminded me of is early in my career, I would always say I wanted to be successful, but I didn't know what successful was, right? And so as we've been on this growth journey, the thing that I discovered was success to me is living a life I love and inspiring other people to do the same.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love that. And I think next year success might look different. And I love that too. I think it's that opening of all those possibilities.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
makes life beautiful.
Yeah. Right. And again, it's coming back, and if, as I was talking, I was thinking about it. It's the same thing really about being in the world and of it. Because I think in one of the poems that we were reading, it talks about that, right? Like that. I think there's intentionality in the journey is intentionality, right? Because you have to, you can only say you're taking a journey. People are screaming, "Meant my life," but you're like, I gotta go. I gotta go. I don't know where I'm going. It's scary, it's dark, but I'm going because there's some voice I'm following, which is my own. I don't know where
Right.
it's going to lead me, but that's an intentional step, right? You're intentionally stepping out of your comfort zone. You're intentionally stepping into the unknown. I mean, that's a courageous step, right? From safety and that very nice curated box you've built to, I don't know. And it's the courageous soul that takes it. And the courageous soul is scared of shit. It's scared.
Yeah.
And I think that people feel like you're not scared. No, you're always scared because you
Yeah.
have no idea what's around the corner. But there's something in you just says, you got to keep going. You got to keep going. You got to keep going.
Oh. So two things that popped in my head while you were sharing that. One is you learn to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes. Yes.
And once you make peace with that, it doesn't make it any less uncomfortable,
Right.
but I think it helps. And the other thing, you mentioned that poem. Oh, what's its title? Just in case somebody wants to look.
Journey. The
The
journey.
journey. Yeah. Um, one of the things that I realized as I was reading that was for a long time, the negative voices were
Mm-hmm.
mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
And there was that,
why were they?
um, well, I think part of it was, um, we are all assimilated and indoctrinated into whatever way of life we've lived.
Yes.
And for 18 years, I lived a very certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And in my soul, I was like, this is not my way. This is not.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was that little tiny little voice that was like, hey, there's something better. There's something better. But there was a lot of negativity that I had built up over those years, almost like a callus, right? And things that you believe about yourself. Like I struggled for a long time feeling like I wasn't good enough.
Mm-hmm. We all. I don't think there's any person. I think that that's a shared reality. I mean, if people are being honest,
Yeah.
are we good enough? Can we really make it? Should we really dream that big? Maybe we should just settle for what is. I mean, I think all of us have it. People who say they don't have it, they're lying to themselves. We have all had it, even quote successful people, but it's just the idea of still doing it, still taking the journey.
Yeah. 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 And what I call it, I call brainwashing myself.
It is.
And
It is.
and I've done a lot of work over the years to change the way I think and change the way I talk to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I make a mistake now, I don't beat myself up about it. I'm like, oh, that was an interesting learning experience. And then I
Mm-hmm.
move on. And that has made a huge difference for me.
Yeah. And that um I'm just writing this down because I think that this is and I will frame it in the form of a question, which is, what internal conversations are you having with yourself? All right.
I don't think most people are even aware of the internal conversations they're
I
having.
wasn't.
I
I'm
wasn't either.
more conscious of it. I'm more conscious. So what I thought yesterday while I was sitting at Lexus, um, was reading the Zero Circle by Rumi. And some of the points is, and I love this, drop pretense at being master of your life. Acknowledge my life is unmanageable. Now, that shit ain't easy to do. But now I acknowledge it because personally, I find a freedom in it. Like, look, I don't know any of this. I'm making this up as I go. I don't have the answers, people, but I'm seeking them, right? Is that seeker? Are you curious? Are you seeking? And I think that when we're able to drop the pretense and say, look, I'm just trying to figure it out, like you are. We're all on a journey. I'm just trying to do the best I can. That takes a lot of pressure off, right? Because when you represent to people that your life is perfect, everything is in order, you have no insecurities, you don't struggle, you don't whatever, you have to keep that act up. And that's it requires a lot of energy to keep up pretense. Pretense requires a lot of energy. And I'm going to put that down too. But it's been freeing for me. And the reality is, I don't worry about other people judging me because I know deep down inside they're struggling too, whether they say it or not.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if they say it because, you know, there's a courage that comes from owning your own truth. Right? You know, Sarah, when I'm talking to you, I say all these things, I don't know where they come from. And I
I
remember I
know
was saying,
I
I was
often
saying, I
tease
wish
you
we take the,
about, yeah. And often tease Rose that she's my spiritual advisor because she'll say these things and I'll be like, oh yeah. Oh yeah.
and
It's
I don't know where the hell it comes from. Like I just said, there's a courage that comes from owning your own truth. Because once you own it, no one can really make you feel less than. You're standing up and saying, look, I am acknowledging I am weak. I struggle. I have insecurities. I don't know. I don't have this all figured out. And once you pivot from that, you're good because if you, as you stumble and you're like, well, I already said I didn't think so. I already gave, it's like I've already given you a foretelling of it. So don't expect anything here. But if I pretend to you everything is perfect and it doesn't, then when I'm struggling, I can't show that to you because I'm letting you think that everything. So
yeah.
and then it requires lying. It becomes one vicious nightmare. And I just feel like there's a human experience that we all understand because we've all been indoctrinated.
Hmm.
And once you acknowledge that, then you have to rebuild.